Welcome to Navigating Beyond, hosted by Navigate Finance, your home of real estate finance where you can realize your potential. Today, we're joined here by Jethro East, the founder of Fairstone Property. Jethro, how are you doing?
Very well. Thank you for having me.
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. Nice to see you looking quite snug in that room and nice little lamp next to you as well.
Brought in specially.
Yeah, yeah. How's the year started for you?
Yeah, it's been good. Yeah, it's all ticking along pretty well. We relocated from London to Brighton about a year and a half ago, so still sort of finding our feet here, but we've got a few projects that are ticking over quite nicely now. So yeah, it's all can't complain. It's been a good start. I'm feeling optimistic about 2025.
Yeah, likewise. No, that's great. It's going to be a big year for everybody. I think there's good sentiment in the market for everybody in the property game and finance game or real estate finance world, let's say. And yeah, definitely feeling good. And if you could just give us, just we'll explore some business themes to start with and just understand more about, what you're doing at the moment and Fairstone Property. But if for those who don't know, what is Fairstone Property? What are you doing? What's the ethos? What's the product that you're delivering?
So Fairstone Property is 10 years old this year. Started by just me in East London and started off by flipping houses. So buying houses that needed a renovation and internally renovating, quite often doing extensions, loft conversions, that sort of thing, and then selling them on. And that worked pretty well. But after a while, I started looking for bigger and better things. So about 5 years ago, we started looking at doing some new build stuff. And the first site I found was a small site for a single house. And then quite soon after that, I found a much larger site that we ended up building a block of 8 flats. So there was a very steep sort of trajectory and learning curve from
I can
flipping
imagine.
houses
I mean, yeah, it's a big step to take for sure.
from flipping houses to doing multi-unit new builds was that was a
Mm,
big step up. So
yeah, yeah,
and then did another one of those, another multi-unit new build in East London, and then that's when we relocated from East London. I'm saying we at that point it was still just me, and
yeah.
then
Well, that's how you have to start, right?
yeah,
That's how it is. Yeah,
always
yeah.
kind of we sounds better.
It does. It definitely does. Yeah.
It is now a we, so I have
Great.
now one other person who works with me who is an architect, and so we do basically all of our architecture in house now, which has been a really good. That's been a really good move. So that was yeah about a year and a half ago that Finn came and started working with me, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
been a really positive step for us.
Well, as you say, it's very key to have, especially not only good architect, but someone that you know and trust and that you've worked with before and that can basically understand how you work and how you want to work and basically replicate that model on every site you basically go for, right? So,
Yeah, I was
yeah,
getting a little bit frustrated because, well, partly the design stage is quite a fun stage. It's
mm,
that's the creative bit a lot of the time. So I wanted to be more involved, but I was also getting a little bit frustrated with the process of going to and fro with an architect, and they kind of do a whole big
yeah,
thing, and then they present to you, and you're a bit like, "Oh, just it would have been so." I was finding more and more that I wanted to be in the room with the architect. And
yeah,
so the architects I was working with were, used to allow me to occasionally pop in and sit around, but then they'd always kick me out again.
yeah, yeah, as they do. But yeah, okay,
But that's
great.
working really well. So it's a much more kind of holistic approach. The design process, I mean, obviously he's a trained architect, so
Yeah.
most of the design comes from him, but it's a very collaborative process, and I'm really enjoying it. It's really fun doing that bit. Designing
Yeah.
something and then seeing it become a real thing is a really good feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, based on, our discussions in the past, you've mentioned the sustainable, self-sufficient kind of product that you've built, not just, for others, but for yourself. I mean, where you're living as well, whether it's purpose built or retrofit or whatever it is. I'd want to understand, where that came from, what motivates you to create, let's say low carbon waste reducing products, where did that, ethos come from really for you?
So the new build projects that we did in London, they all met building regulations. On the second of the new build blocks, we were trying to go slightly above and try and get slightly better in terms of our sustainability, but it was still generally just following whatever the building regulations were.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it was when I moved, I met Finn. He's very interested in sustainability as well, and we were discussing kind of what our ethos was going to be moving forward. And so yeah, we had a combined interest in trying to be sustainable. So that then, I think that really reignited my excitement about property development. Not that I wasn't enjoying it, but I was kind of looking for a direction. I was also looking for a way to try and differentiate Fairstone Property as a developer. Property developers get a little bit of a bad name sometimes. So I think it made me feel really proud again of being a property developer. And if you can create something that you feel, really proud of at the end of the day, I think, that's it's got to be a good thing. So that it was at that point that we started kind of transitioning into, being a sustainable developer.
Yeah, look, to be proud of what you do is the ultimate objective, and especially, to have that kind of identity in the market, in the sector. You are building that kind of product. I'm just curious, does delivering a more sustainable product make it easier to deal with local councils and get consents, or does it not necessarily correlate?
You would hope so. Doesn't seem to, frustratingly, at the moment. So we're going through 3 different planning applications at the moment on 3 different sites. And we made it really clear in all of those planning applications that these were going to be highly sustainable developments. And we hoped that would this
Help,
process.
yeah, help it move faster at least, right?
The planning process is frustrating. I'd say that was one of the most frustrating things for us at the moment is just how slowly it moves. And yeah, there doesn't seem to be a good sort of collaborative way that developers and local planners kind of work at the moment. For me, you submit something and then they just basically say yes or no. And it would be great if there was a little bit more of a dialogue during that process. I mean, there is sometimes a little bit of a dialogue, but if they have said that they think that whatever site you have does have the potential to have some new dwellings or a new dwelling on it, then at that point, surely it would be great if there was just a little bit more of a kind of collaborative approach where they would occasionally make suggestions of what they would kind of feel would be okay there. Otherwise, it just gets refused, and then you either appeal it, which then can take a long, long time, or you just keep resubmitting kind of new plans, which is what we do. But yeah, sorry, in answer to your question, I wish it made more of a difference, the fact that you're kind of building homes that are significantly better than just what building regs requires, but at the moment it doesn't seem to.
There should be, and maybe eventually, hopefully, if they want to encourage this way of building moving forwards, they will do so. Hopefully you're ahead of the curve and it's going to be easier for you. Let's see,
Fingers crossed. Yeah,
fingers
absolutely.
both, yeah. And Jethro, you're focusing on, is it more of a volume of sites rather than larger ones at the moment?
So the 3 projects that we've got ongoing in Brighton at the moment are all smaller sites. So there's 2 sites which are for a single new build house and one of them which is for 2 new build houses. And at the moment we think we're probably going to sell those on, once they have planning, to a builder who can then build them out.
Yeah.
The reason for that is, I mean, we know how to build, but we're not builders. So when we go to build, we will collaborate with a company who specialize in construction. And in terms of our workload for a project, in terms of the design, the technical design, discharging all the planning conditions, figuring out all the civil design aspects, rendering, project managing, that whole thing, is very similar if it's a single house or if it's a block of 8 flats. I mean, obviously there's a little bit more work in terms of the design, but in terms of that project management process from start to finish, very similar amount of workload for us. So the smaller projects we will probably sell on once they have planning and allow the builder to build those out. And then we at some point later on this year start looking for some slightly bigger sites, which we'll then build out ourselves. And at the moment, the plan is to try and keep everything we build. So the stuff that we're not planning to keep, we'll sell on with planning. The stuff that we decide we would like to keep, we'll build ourselves. And then we'll really, it's even more important that we build them in a way that means they're going to be highly sustainable in terms of the way they're built and the way that they operate. And also they're going to be built to last. They're going to be brilliant homes that we'll then rent out to people who, can live in lovely, warm, mold-free, homes with very low bills. So that's the plan at the moment. So at some point later this year, the moment we're kind of building up a little bit of cash to help us with those slightly bigger projects, and then hopefully later this year start.
Okay. Yeah, great. And look, Jethro, I did some digging before this podcast, and I thought, let's see if there's anything I don't know about Jethro. And one thing that I didn't know is that you were initially in music, actually, before you got into the property business. Just wondering, what was that transition like, or were you always involved in property somehow? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, it was quite a transition. It was quite a long time ago now, but
Yeah, I'm sure.
still etched into my memory. Yeah, I had been in music for a long time as a composer slash music producer, but then also as a DJ. And I was trying to make a living by writing music, producing music, but I found that was really difficult. The DJing would always subsidize that. And actually, for the majority of that time, I earned considerably more money DJing than I did from composing and producing music.
Wow, okay.
And that was fine in my 20s. In fact, it was great fun, in my
I'm sure it was fun. I mean,
in
it
my
sounds fun.
20s,
Yeah.
early 30s, it was still sort of fun. Mid 30s,
Yeah.
I'd kind of got to the point where being up until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 5 nights a week,
Yeah.
got
It's
a
lot,
bit
isn't it?
much.
Yeah.
And it's also horrible for your social life because you're always working when people are inviting you to do things.
Yeah, exactly right. I can imagine.
So it got to the point where I wanted to make a big change, and I looked at quite a few different things actually. It wasn't instantly, property wasn't I didn't know a thing about property, I had no
Yeah.
experience in
Yeah.
property whatsoever. I knew that I wanted to run my own business and it wanted to be something completely disconnected to music, but it wanted to be something creative. So something that had some sort of design element in it or something like that. And yeah, played around with a few different ideas, and then there's actually a friend of mine who ran a building which they had taken out a long lease on. So it was a commercial building. They'd taken out a long lease. They'd split that building into music studios, or music and photographic studios.
Hmm.
And then they were renting out the smaller units to people. And that was working really well. It was a really cool space, lots of interesting things going on there. And I was like, oh, this would be great. And so that was actually my transition in. And it's obviously quite tricky to start. That's quite a big kind of project to start with.
Mm.
I tried it, and no one who owned large commercial buildings wanted to rent them to me. So I just decided it'd be worth just starting with a small simple house flip. And I was living in Hackney at the time, and at that time, Newham in East London, it was just post Olympics, so Newham is just really booming, and so
Massive.
that's where I started. Bought a cheap house, renovated it, did quite well on the first one or the first two, and then that was it. It was just went from there.
Amazing. Look, I mean, working in finance, real estate finance, obviously dealing with people in real estate, you come across all sorts of people that have had different livelihoods. It's quite interesting. It always impresses me to see, how there's no one universal route into real estate. Real estate is let's say, a natural resource that we all have, that we just kind of mine into and find ways to express ourselves differently and make a good living. But the route to the mine is different for a lot of people. And, you could be doing anything. And I'd actually be curious to understand, a bit more about, your first property deal. I mean, what was that like? How did you get into it? If someone's listening now and wants to understand, or if they want to pivot from what they're doing and want to get into property, what was it like for you? Did you use any financing tools to get you there? Can you explain it a little bit?
Sure. So I was very fortunate that my parents were able to give me a small amount of money. I think they gave me about £40,000, which was incredibly helpful at the beginning. I also, at that time, so I just wasn't sure what, I knew that I wanted to change careers, but I didn't know exactly how. And I'd actually started a proper normal job. For the first time in my life, I had a full-time paid job. So I started working for one of the music agencies that I'd been working with. So they were a music agency who did music for adverts, for TV, film, so all sorts of type of syncing music. I'd been writing some music for them as a composer, and I thought it would be interesting to try working for them in the office. So they said, yeah, sure, come and give it a go. So actually I had a full-time day job. I was still DJing in the evenings quite regularly and still also composing on the side. So I had 3 jobs at that point. I was quite often DJing until, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning during the week, getting home about 4, sleeping till 7, and then getting up and having to go into the office in central London.
Exhausting.
So that was tough, but that meant I could also save up a bit of money. So I saved up a bit of money doing that. It was tricky, but I was single at the time, which I think probably helped because I could just really focus in on what I wanted to do. And so I used that to build up a little bit of money, combined that with the money that my parents had given me, and I bought my first house. And the first house I bought was this was before they changed the stamp duty rules, and so everything under £250,000 was considerably cheaper in terms of stamp duty. So I knew I wanted to buy something under 250,000, but I really wanted to buy a freehold property rather than a leasehold property. So I bought this is what the agent told me. He said, this is the last freehold property in Newham that will be sold for under £250,000.
Wow.
And it was like a very unusual property. It had a flying freehold, so it had a section that was missing on the ground floor, and people could go through the property to get to some flats at the back.
Wow, okay, that's
very complicated.
A flying freehold.
Freehold, yeah. So it had the first floor.
You can imagine, yeah.
The first kind of went over
like a public walkway or something.
Well,
Point.
An access point for some flats at the back. So very complicated. And it had a loft that had been converted illegally. So it didn't have building regs. So it was a very complicated purchase. And I bought that using bridging, which a broker helped me get.
Yeah.
And then I bought it and I was like, I realized started speaking to a structural engineer, and he was like, yeah, this is, this loft is going to need some major work. So that kind of was a bit scary.
Yeah, I'm sure, yeah.
And then I'd had an accident on my motorbike. So I was using a little moped to commute into central London when I had this job. And I was driving just one afternoon on my moped, and a guy in a van just didn't see me and knocked me off my moped. And I broke my leg. Luckily, there was some...
Intense.
Yeah, it was a bit intense. Luckily, there was some witnesses, and they stayed around and they gave statements to the police. And so actually, through the insurance, I got an insurance payout from...
Oh, wow, okay. Yeah, I by the way, something similar happened to a friend of mine, funnily enough. They weren't driving a moped, they were just walking, they got hit by a car. But yeah, you never know.
You wouldn't wish it on anyone.
You wouldn't wish it.
But at that time, that money can quite useful. So I now have a piece of titanium, a bit of titanium in my leg. So it broke my femur, the biggest bone in your body.
What, you broke your femur? Wow,
yeah.
that's a big bone. I mean,
yeah.
It must have hurt. I mean, what'd that feel like?
Yeah, it took a while. I was on crutches for quite a while. So it was, it's fairly serious.
Feel that from here.
And I was wearing a full kind of like motorbike helmet that you'd wear if you were driving a Ducati or something, which I remember thinking was a bit annoying on my tiny little 50cc scooter. But the guy, the ambulance driver, said if you hadn't been wearing that, the little cool scooter helmets you can get,
yeah, absolutely,
they said if I'd been wearing one of those little scooter helmets, they would have been rebuilding my face. Like,
that's crazy.
This helmet was like...
Let this be an advert for anybody driving or a moped or motorbike, or even the line bikes out here. I mean, what I don't understand, I've said this, and I know it's a bit off topic, but the Santander bikes, line bikes, anybody can rent them. And usually the people that rent them don't really know or are unfamiliar with the whole cycling game. And they're not aware of the signs and the rules of the road. And they're more likely to get in an accident. And they don't come with helmets. They need to regulate that and make sure that there are helmets attached to these bikes, because I got hit off a line bike, not the other day, 6 months ago. Wasn't as, let's say, violent as your accident, but I was limping into a meeting and bleeding out my leg. But, it's crazy how unregulated that is, but that's another theme. But yeah, I'm glad you're okay, and I'm glad,
Yeah,
let's say
it
in
was fine.
hindsight, it gave you a
Yeah,
bit of extra cash actually to help you with
gave me a bit
what
of
you
cash,
did.
and it also
Yeah,
meant I was allowed to work. So this is when I still had my full-time day job, and it meant that I could work from home quite a bit, which then actually
great,
helped that
great.
transition from being employed to being, a business owner. So I don't know, serendipitous, who knows, something like that.
Serendipitous, maybe, yeah, to an extent, yeah. And look, you got to where you are now, and it's a very interesting. The path that people always try to envisage in their minds isn't exactly anywhere near what might actually happen. You never know what happens in life. Life is a very fluid experience. We don't know, but I'm getting notes of, I mean, in terms of what you were doing before and what you're doing now, there are notes of like expression. You seem to be very expressive. You like to, with the music, composing, with what you're building. It's very much an embodiment of what you're feeling and expressing. And is that something you've always thought of? That is something that you resonate with?
Yeah, I've always been creative. My parents were both teachers, but I come from quite a creative household, so that was always encouraged when I was growing up. So yeah, that's important to me. I think creating something that didn't exist before you were there. I think there's a great feeling in doing that, and I get quite a similar
Absolutely.
feeling when you write a piece of music that you're really you really love, you're really proud of. That's such an amazing feeling, and I get quite a similar feeling now when I am designing a building, and then you
Hmm.
build a building, and this building didn't exist before you came along, and
Exactly.
it can be a great feeling. It's nerve wracking at times because it's it's building's difficult, building's tough.
It's difficult. I mean, even now, especially now, it's more expensive, and finance is more expensive. I shouldn't be saying it, but obviously it is.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
and a lot of things you have to weigh up. Yeah, Jethro, I was reading a bit more about you. Obviously, you're not new to podcasts. You've done some in the past, and I think you mentioned somewhere you read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Tell me about how that influenced the way you think.
So I now know that is it's a bit of a cliche, that book. It's kind of the book that quite a few people kind of quote as being a book that changed the way they thought. But for me, it just was really true. So my parents are teachers. They're kind of hippies. I was never taught about finance. Or no, I mean, I think most people aren't. Certainly in this country, you're not taught about it in school at all.
See, it's great, especially in this country of all countries, that it should be a staple of our education.
I 100% agree. And so I had got to the age to my mid 30s, not having a clue about how money worked, about how finance worked, about, debt, about equity, I literally didn't know about anything. I had no savings, had no money. I was in a job that I was very frustrated with. I was spending every single penny that I earned. And that was just all I was used to. That's all I knew. And then it was the guy who owned the music agency that I was working for. He obviously saw that I was an entrepreneur, and it was him that recommended that book to me, which is quite unusual.
Okay. Yeah,
But so
interesting.
he started that transition from me, for me being an entrepreneur and understanding the way that money worked, and being able
Mm.
to use that to help me start a business. But yeah, that was at the time completely just when you just don't know anything, and it's a book that's quite easy to read, and
Yeah,
it
absolutely. Yeah, it's a
just
great book.
yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And you obviously, in our discussions in the past, and from what I've seen, you worked with, or you learned a lot from someone called Susanna Cole as a mentor.
I
Can you tell
did.
us a bit about that and how that helped shape, your early property development career and the knowledge base which you work with?
So this was, yeah, when like I said, I just didn't know anything about property at all. Started watching lots of YouTube videos, doing lots of research, reading books, but it's still incredibly daunting, that idea of, spending, a big chunk of money on something that could not work at all. So
Feels like a gamble in the beginning for sure.
really does. It really does.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
I decided that I would try and get as much information as I could. I'm definitely a sort of person who learns by doing things or by seeing things done. So I found Susanna Cole. She's got quite a good online presence. Actually, I don't know if she still does or what she's still doing. I haven't spoken to her for quite a long time, but she offered a mentorship program at that time, which was a year long. It involved going to Bristol once a month and spending either a day or a whole weekend, with a bunch of other people, and learning by going around the properties that she had, and like, that speaking to builders, and like looking at stuff. And so it was a really good year. I did learn a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and it was definitely a worthwhile process for me. I quite quickly diverted away from kind of her model. So her model was always what she would call vanilla refurb. So she'd just do in and out as quick as possible, internal new kitchens, new bathrooms, etc., etc., and then get out as quick as possible. And she would work with investors on a joint venture basis. And
Okay.
I decided quite early on that I was more interested in development. So even on the first sort of, I think maybe I only did one or two projects that were like a vanilla in terms of just in and out. Everything else I wanted to build. I wanted to learn how to build. That was really important to me. So I wanted to learn how to do lofts. I wanted to learn how to do extensions, and then that moved into me wanting to learn how to do new builds. And so quite soon I kind of diverted away from that model. But I do now want to start keeping some things. So up to very recently, I didn't keep anything. It was all about using the money, recycling it back into the next project, and
Yeah.
kind of building and doing bigger and bigger developments. But at some point, 10 years in now, I think it's probably about time to start trying to keep some stuff for the kind of the long terms. So yeah, she would always advocate for keeping things. So I am sort of going back a little bit to that model. But yeah, maybe I should give her a call. I haven't heard or spoken to her for a long time. I don't even know if she's
Yeah.
still doing what she's doing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I think it's nice to see that, you've obviously very proactive and you wanted to do and the gaps in knowledge you wanted to fill. And, I think it's nice to see the willingness to have a mentor. I think mentorship is a very important thing for everybody in any industry. I think it's something that everybody should always try and focus on. If it's something that they want to do, find an example that you can communicate with and who's open to teaching you, and work with them and learn from them. It's the most, let's say, applicable way of learning anything, I think, when you're,
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
100% agree. And she was the only mentor that I had that was, an official mentor, and I paid for that mentorship course that she did. Since after then, I had loads of other mentors who I worked with, who were other developers who were just a bit further along than me. And if we got on and we made friends, it's amazing how much people will help you if they like you. And so I had loads of other great mentors that were just nothing official, just people who helped me along the way. And I hope that whenever anyone, anyone contacts me, which they do occasionally, that if they're thinking about, trying out property development, I'm always there, and I'll always give my time to other people in that same way.
Absolutely.
Spread the knowledge.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. You'll have people looking up to you, I'm sure already, but there'll be more in good time, and maybe you'll have your own mentorship program as well. Yeah, in the works, maybe.
Feels a bit too much like being a teacher and following in my parents'
Well, I was
footsteps.
about to say, it's in the family, it's in the genetics from both sides as well. I mean, it's a lot of influence. So
Yeah, maybe we'll see.
yeah. Well, I guess we can kind of segue into a bit more philosophical discussion and talking about, how things can develop and how we can succeed in life. For you, Jethro, what is success? What is success for you in your career and in your life generally?
Wow, yeah, big question. I think it's just, enjoying what you're doing and doing stuff that you think is worthwhile. I think probably, having enough money to not worry about, keeping a roof over your own head is obviously helpful. But I think I'm certainly not one of those people who is completely focused by, by money. It's useful to have resources. Much more kind of motivated by doing stuff that I feel is really, really worthwhile, stuff that I can be really proud of. And I think that's why meeting Finn was really positive. Having someone that can kind of, you can bounce off, and whenever you're not sure, because actually in property development there are loads of times where you can maximize your profit by just cutting corners here or there, or
Mm.
using some information you have to kind of squeeze someone a little bit here, or kind of undercut them there, or not bother paying this bill. There's so
Yeah.
many times that there's little things that you can do, or use a cheaper material for this, or not bother
A lot
putting
of
that.
developers do all of this,
And so
unfortunately.
actually, and sometimes if you're worried about projects overrunning, it's just go over budget, or it's taking longer than you expect. It sometimes is easy to make those decisions just out of kind of the stress of the situation. So having someone to work with who will always go, no, come on, let's take a second, and that's we're okay. Let's make sure we do this properly. So I think just generally building things that hopefully will be there long after I've gone. That is that I guess having a bit of a legacy, leaving some really good properties behind, I think and that's pretty. That would
Be a
count
great
that as
outcome.
being. I'd count that as success. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, I couldn't agree with you more. It's about having a good balance in life, right? Between work and lifestyle and what you're trying to build, but also how you're trying to experience life. Our most, let's say, treasured resource is time. And if you spend all of it just obsessing too much over, let's say making money or having a career in that sense, then you're gonna just miss out on a lot of things. So it's about, I guess, as you say, being happy, being proud, and let's say being able to leave a good legacy
Yeah.
behind for future generations as well. And
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's
Balance.
a very honorable way to live.
Yeah, I think that the word balance that you use, I think, is actually a really important one, because when you start a company, or as when you're starting out being an entrepreneur, whatever it is you're doing, you kind of have to. It has to just completely consume you. Like, really, if you're going to make a big career change, or if you're going to start something new, there's going to be so much stuff you're going to need to learn. You're going to have to just throw yourself into it. And then I think some entrepreneurs just never get out of that mindset, and they just keep going. And actually, recently, I have been quite good at resetting that balance a little bit and having a bit more of a kind of a good work-life balance. Because otherwise, what's the point?
What's the
Like
point?
what
Yeah, yeah,
what are you going to do
totally.
with all just keep? I think that was the other reason when a year and a half ago, when we'd completed the second of these big projects that had been so completely all-consuming for me, and I kind of took a step, and other developers were saying, well, that's it, now it's 50 units, or now you start building skyscrapers, and I was like, is that what I want to do? I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Because could have been my next step. I could just be like, right, okay, let's take this, let's leverage to the max,
You see people
and
doing it
let's.
all the time. You see
Yeah.
people doing it all the time. It's
Yeah.
that's a very scary jump, because I've had clients, you know, take those big lunges without the preparation, and you're basically gambling your whole life's work into one big project, and then you get stuck. And well, hopefully everyone doesn't want to be in that situation, but I've seen it happen. I've had to dig some clients out of some pretty deep holes and they're, let's say leveraged to the hilt, and there's not much, one can do in that situation. There's always solutions, but it makes me wonder sometimes why some people get ahead of themselves. Everything has to be treated with a lot of caution.
So the first of these two large buildings, there was no other way that I could have done it. Everything that I had was in this building, and if it went
Yeah,
badly, it could have financially ruined me.
yeah,
There's no other way. You just had to do it that time, and it's really stressful. You lose loads of sleep. You just kind of, my partner at the time was like, I'm not sure this is healthy. It's like I was just spending hours and hours and hours at the laptop, and just kind of, we had COVID at the same time as well. So I was
or what?
I
Yeah,
was in
crazy
lockdown,
time.
working from home, and literally just obsessing over this building. I mean,
Yeah,
it was crazy. And then the second one, sort of, you're like, oh, okay, I'm not quite as highly leveraged on this one. This is a bit more easier. And then there was two ways I could have gone. I could have either just carried on, or actually what I've done is I've gone the other direction. We started doing some smaller projects, diversifying a little bit, and I quite like the idea that no single project could bankrupt me. There's like
that's the key.
I
Yeah,
quite
that's
like
the key.
I'm quite happy for that to just be the case until I
For your
die
peace of
now.
mind,
Yeah.
for your peace of mind, because you've been through that process now, and you never know. Like we said earlier, you never know what life might throw at you, and what opportunities may arise. Something might be a no-brainer. You never know. But again, your philosophy around, let's say, spreading the bet in a way, I wouldn't want to call it a bet, but spreading the risk, seems to be a much more, let's say, measured way of dealing with things.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah,
Helps you sleep better as well.
it helps you sleep better as well. And that's another thing that's important to be happy in
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, interesting question about the future. And I don't want to just say, oh, what do you see happening in the future or anything? Because like we've just explored in this conversation, you never really know. But one thing I'd like to explore is both professionally and personally, what's one thing you hope will never change in the future for you?
Yeah, big question. Not sure. That I think I found I'm definitely the happiest I've ever been in my work
Excellent.
life at the
Excellent.
moment. And actually that then means I'm as happy as I've ever been in my personal life as well. So actually you find me at a good moment where
Great.
things are good. So I mean, long may that continue. I hope,
Indeed.
that, I feel I'm challenged at work, but it's not, I'm not, not too much. The kind of, we're doing projects that are exciting, interesting, but it's not, they're not too stressful. And then actually that means I've got more time to spend. Obviously made quite a big change in terms of moving from London. I'm from London, born in London, so
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
city I know very well. To moving to Brighton, but actually because I've got a little bit more time and I've been able to have a slightly better life balance. I mean, we actually finish work at 4 now, so 4 p.m.
When it gets dark, basically. In the
Well, at the
winter.
moment, but in the summer, Brighton's such a great city. I love
Yeah,
it.
oh yeah,
I'm
it's beautiful.
really
It's
really
beautiful.
enjoying being here. I've made actually quite a surprising number of new friends since I've been here, and yeah, just really enjoying, making some new connections with people, and yeah, balance, that word again. I
Again,
think
yeah, yeah,
balance. I'd like the balance to continue. That would be something I'd like.
absolutely. And yeah, it must be nice to be by the coast. I mean, for me, the coast is the best place. Nice, serene, tranquil. People are different as
It
well.
suits me at this point in my life.
Mm.
When I was in my 20s, I think East London and, kind of that, it had all the kind of the edginess and the kind of whatever, Brighton doesn't have a version of Dalston, what Dalston
Yeah,
was
that's for
like
sure. Yeah,
in,
yeah.
in the kind of, 10 years ago. But for now, where I am in my life right now, I love it. Love it down here.
Amazing, amazing. Look, I know we could speak all day really, but just a couple more things I want to ask you. Firstly, are you still into music? You still producing anything? Still composing in your
Not
free
doing it.
time? No.
Not doing anything at the moment. It's always something that I think probably at some point I'll go back to as a hobby. It's I've still got the software on a computer somewhere, and
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
who knows? I think at the moment my creative kind of itch is being scratched by the stuff I'm doing at work. So there's
Mm.
no plans to do it anytime soon. But I think probably at some point I will.
Sure.
Who
Yeah.
knows?
And Jethro, if, for anyone watching, if you could give a bit of advice to somebody who, let's say, like you, is in another career, thinking of making that transition into the property game by hook or by crook, one way or the other, what would you advise them? What could you tell them? Or even in another way of looking at it, what would you say to a younger Jethro, for what is to come and how you can plan ahead? What advice would you give?
I mean, I think, yeah, go for it. It's been a great career change for me. I'm incredibly pleased that I did it when I did it. It was tough. Be prepared to kind of get your hands dirty. I mean, when you're starting a business, you have to do everything. So you have to be able to wear lots and lots of different hats. You have to be able to, get on site, get your boots on. I don't believe in this idea of just sitting behind a computer all day. If you're a property developer, you need
Yeah.
to
You
get
got
on
to be a
site.
property developer. You
You
got
need
to
to
get
get
your
on
hands
site.
dirty.
You
Yeah.
need to understand it. You need to talk to it's amazing how much time people will give you. So the structural engineers, talk to them. Learn. You need to know a little bit about everything. So just talk to as many people as you can. find a mentor or mentors. I think that's definitely a good piece of advice. But yeah,
Yeah,
whenever I meet someone who I think has that entrepreneurial spirit, I'm always encouraging people to
absolutely.
start their own business. It's
Yeah.
been really really successful for me, and I'm yeah, definitely encourage it.
Yeah, well, it served you well, and thank you so much, Jethro, for coming on this podcast. It's really been very insightful, informative, and
Yeah.
interesting just to hear about this unique journey you've taken.
Thank you for having me. We haven't talked about finance very much at all. I
Yeah,
thought we were
yeah,
going
I
to be
know. There's
talking
just,
about money.
I know, but you know what? There was just so much to explore with you before we could even touch on finance. But that's for another day.
Yeah. Well, maybe I can come back on and we can do some
Yeah, of
spreadsheets
course.
and do some numbers.
Yeah, well, that I don't know how fun that would be, but yeah. But I'm going to stop the recording in a bit. We could continue to speak between us, but yeah, thank you for joining, and we hope everyone enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you.